everybody. Welcome to the Fertility Show Let's All Talk webinar series. I'm sorry that we're a few minutes late today, but we are here ready to go. I'm Jessica Hepburn, your host for this evening. Welcome if you're joining us for the first time, or welcome back if you've been joining our seminars since January. They've been running now. And this month, we're moving on to a new topic. Last month, we were talking about donation, and this month, we're talking about adoption and surrogacy, and we have some great guests for you this evening who I'll introduce you to in a minute. But first, I just wanted to remind everyone what the aim of these events are. They are targeted at people who are going through a fertility struggle to try and give them the best expert support and advice. And we're here every Wednesday, usually at 8 o'clock, but tonight we're coming to you an hour earlier. Hopefully I don't need to tell you why, something to do with something beginning with the letter F. We're here generally every Wednesday at 8, leading up to our first online summit, which is taking place from Friday the 24th to Monday the 27th this September. And very excitingly, if you haven't seen or heard yet, tickets went on sale this week. And I really would recommend getting a ticket. We've been putting together the most amazing lineup for you. We're going to have over 64 sessions and speakers across those 4 days. And that will bring you the best advice through sessions and Q&As. And that all leads up to the next live show, which will take place next May at our home in Olympia, where we'll have over 100 exhibitors and more sessions and real life hugs. Anyway, just one more thing before I introduce this evening's guests, and that is that these events are being brought to you, and in fact the online summit is as well, in association with PACT, the social networking app, which is designed for women who are trying to conceive all the way through to motherhood. And my lovely co-host of these webinars, who's on holiday at the moment, hello Sophie if you're watching, and hasn't turned on the football yet, she is an ambassador of PACT, and you'll find her in the app on a regular basis, and you can sign up for completely free. And if you do, go and join the Fertility Show group, where you'll find Sophie and other women just like you who are going through the same thing for more support and advice. These events are also brought to you in association with Fertility Network UK, who are the national charity supporting patients, and also my own organisation, Fertility Fest, which is the world's first arts festival dedicated to fertility. Now, that's all the housekeeping stuff. We're going to turn to tonight's event, which is about adoption in the UK. I'd like to introduce our first two guests, Emma Johnson and Louise Hartley, who are from the PACT agency. Hello, Emma. Hello, Louise. Welcome.
Hi, Jessica.
Lovely to have you. We don't always have two guests, but we did last week for the first time, and it worked really well. So a real privilege to have you both. And I know PACT is a regular exhibitor at the Fertility Show. So can you start by just telling us a little bit about PACT and what you both do there?
Yeah, so PACT is a voluntary adoption agency. We're based in London, Reading and Brighton. That's where we have offices. We've also got social workers in Oxford. And we're a charity, non-profit making charity. What we do is adoption and making families. So I am team manager based in Reading. Louise, do you want to introduce yourself, based in London?
Hi, Jessica. I am the team manager based in our London office in Pimlico. And I've been there for about 7.5 years.
Great. Well, thank you. So I'm just going to tell everyone how our webinars work. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions myself over the next 25 minutes. Hope that's okay. And then we go to our audience to see if they have any questions. We like to protect everyone's anonymity at the reality show, so we don't go live to our audiences. We ask you all to put any questions that you have for Louise and Emma in the Q&A function, and Laura, our lovely managing director, will come in as the voice of God and ask us the questions after I've asked you my 5 questions. So, and we'll try to get through as many as we possibly can before kickoff at 8 o'clock. So can I start by asking you, like, I'll start with you, Emma, but then maybe Louise, you can chip in. Like, if you were giving a first piece of advice to someone who is thinking about adoption, what would it be?
Do you know, the best advice I think I can give is to be really broad-minded about what you think a family looks like, what you think your family looks like. So families are made up in lots of different ways, we know that. But for people who are exploring fertility, probably they're thinking of a route to adoption, to having a family that will involve maybe having 1 child at a time. If they're looking at fertility treatment, maybe twins, if that's the route they go down. In adoption, you have the opportunity to look at all the children who are waiting and to decide what you have to offer as a parent and the children that you feel would be the best match for you. And that's kind of what it is. It's a little bit like matchmaking. Now, some people will have done that and know what that means, but it's about finding the right parent, the right parents for the right child. And that's kind of, Louise, what we spend our time doing, isn't it? It's what our social workers spend their time doing. So you may have in your head that your family looks like one newborn baby arriving and growing up, and then maybe another. But in adoption, you are able to consider whether you want to adopt 1, 2, 3, 4, all at once, separately, whether you feel you're best suited to looking after boys or girls or a mixture. And the age of child isn't necessarily a newborn. Now, there may be young children waiting for adoption, and there are young children waiting for adoption, but there are also children who are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, who are walking and talking, got their own interests and opinions and hobbies. So it is very different to think about starting a family and choosing that family for yourself, the ones that you really feel are the right children for you. Now, for us, that's a really special thing to be able to do, and quite different to things that people who've been exploring for fertility might have been going through when they're thinking about what their family looks like. When I talk, just children come to mind, really, families that we have now who've joined, several families of 2 or 3 children who've joined families even in the last few weeks, and then they're in those early stages of parenthood, and they're not having to deal with getting up in the night for feeds and nappy changes, but they are dealing with children who have come sort of ready formed, wanting parents and needing families. So best advice, be really broad and open-minded.
Brilliant. And you've touched on a lot of things there, Emma, that I think we'll explore in a little bit more depth later on. Would you have anything to add to that, Louise?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is read widely about adoption and contact agencies like ourselves, your local authority, and just find out about adoption. Obviously, we can talk a little bit about the children waiting, but find out, read widely. We can sort of provide with book lists that we would recommend to prepare really for the needs of children that are waiting for homes.
Yeah, brilliant advice. It's all about
Jessica. Jessica, I'm gonna jump in there and add to that. Not to be daunted. Whatever it is that you're researching online, you'll find thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. It's the same if you're looking at fertility options or adoption. Where do you start and where do you stop? You could go on forever. First for Adoption is a really great place to start, because that tells you about adoption generally, and about adoption agencies and about local authorities and the route into adoption. And our website, we aim to make our website, our PACT website, kind of a one-stop shop. Hopefully it will tell you everything you need to know. So pick a starting place like that. Top tip, if you're Googling adoption, make sure you're looking at UK-based pages, because adoption is different around the world, and a huge amount of information on the internet is from the US, not surprisingly. And adoption is quite different there. The process is different. The children and the demographic is different. So don't go down rabbit holes where you're followed a route and you're not really sure whether what you're reading is true or not. I'd pick first for adoption, and of course I'd recommend our own website, our PACT website as well, as a really good starting place.
And I think that's really good advice. And again, you've touched on something there, the difference between UK and foreign adoption, which we'll come on to in my questions, if that's okay. And so maybe you can elaborate on that a bit. But, you know, it's so overwhelming, isn't it? Like how much information you can get these days, but actually research is always really important. And that's certainly why we're, you know, wanting to have seminars like this. And we're so delighted to have you here. So Louise, can I turn to you now? This is a session specifically about adopting in the UK, and later this month we have a session about adopting from abroad. But can you maybe just like give us a little headline on what the differences are, just to sort of point people in that the right direction around that?
Yeah, well, interesting actually, up until a few years ago, PACT used to provide a service, an intercountry adoption service, assessing adopters for about 44 local authorities actually, and we closed that service a few years ago, and the Intercountry Adoption Centre deal with the majority of that now if the local authority don't do that. The thing I would say is it's a similar process in as much as the fact that you have to go through the same adoption process, the same 6-month process, which we'll probably talk about in more detail in a minute. The difference really is at the end, and with intercountry adoption, there's a countries within the Hague and countries outside of that, and there's different principles for different sort of practices and processes at the end once you've been approved by a panel in this country. What we need to do then there's different additional processes whereby you have various different sort of checks and things, and then once you have been approved as an adopter, you would then go out to explore adoption agencies, often orphanages, in a different country, and be matched with your child. But then what you would have to do then is care for that child and everything else, and then you have an adoption there, and you bring the child back to the country, and then you would have a process then called a welfare supervision process. And basically a social worker in this country would come out regularly and ensure that the child was okay and progressing okay, and then you would put a formal application in to adopt if you were outside of the Hague. So
outside of the Hague, I'm not sure that I fully understand what that means, outside of the Hague.
There's certain countries that are in the Hague Convention, our adoption orders are recognised there. That's
okay. So the Hague, like, just imagine, I'm totally ignorant, and there might be people who are ignorant. Right? I always like to assume that there is no question that is too stupid. So I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, but tell us what the Hague Convention is. And, you know, like, how do you find out which countries are in it and which countries are outside it?
Yeah, so what I would say the best thing, because like I say, it's not something we specialise in or anything more. And I've just given you a very loose sort of idea. So the best thing I would suggest is, like Emma suggested, our PACT website. There's the IAC, which is the Intercountry Adoption Centre, and they have got a wonderful website which with sort of step-by-step processes of how to adopt abroad, and they'd be able to give you all the sort of the nuances. So that is what I would recommend anybody on this forum did. rather than kind of listen to me because it's not my specialist subject.
And actually, I don't want to spend too much on talking about adoption from abroad, because ICA are actually talking in 2 weeks' time. So, but if I understood you correctly there, Louise, so a lot of the initial sort of approval process will be quite similar, but then at the back end, it's
exactly the same. And when PACT were providing inter-country adoption services for local authorities that weren't providing it, so we had a contract to provide the recruitment for those people. So we would get the adopters would be recruited, and then we would carry out their 6-month assessment, and in exactly the same way as we would for our UK domestic adoption, and they would be approved at our PACT panel. And then once that happens, that's when the process kind of changes.
Right, brilliant. That's really clear. So, because it is quite a minefield if you're coming to this completely like not knowing anything for the first time. And the other thing, and if I can turn to you now, Emma, is this like all the different types of adoption agencies in the UK, from local authorities, government agencies to charities. Can you talk us through the difference and the similarities, the differences, and how do you decide where to go if you're coming to this for the first time?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's back to this thing about don't be daunted. It could be quite baffling when you first start looking into it. And unless you know where to start, then how do we even get going? So it's really important to understand that there are two, really, I say two, sort of two plus an extra places that you can look. So firstly, you might go to your local authority. The council closest to where you live usually would be recommended, because councils tend to be looking for people to assess and approve adopters who are living within their local area. And they should have, you can go on their website, have a look at what they have to offer, put in adoption and whatever your council is, and it will bring up that information for you. The reason I say one and a bit is because local authorities, so wherever you live, your local authority, the vast majority of them over the last couple of years have grouped together into regional adoption agencies. So, for example, lots of the London authorities are grouped together into Adopt London, North, South, East, West, and there are a range of others. So they've clubbed together. So rather than working in lots and lots of little areas, duplicating work, they're working together in regions. And that's across the country. So you will either, if you Google, look for your local authority where you live, it will probably, it's just a handful that aren't yet in regional adoption agencies, it will probably redirect you to a website for your regional adoption agency, where it will have all of the information of all of these local authorities working together in adoption. The other place that you can look is to an organisation like ourselves. We're a voluntary adoption agency, and we work alongside local authorities and regional adoption agencies in adoption. Voluntary adoption agencies are charities, so we're a charitable organisation. We're not run by the council. We are our own organisations. And we, VAAs, voluntary adoption agencies, exist because it's incredibly difficult for local authorities to do all of the adoption work they have to do. There are too many children requiring adoption, and therefore, probably before they get to that point, requiring child protection services and early intervention services and all of those things that councils have to do, local authorities have to do. That it's incredibly difficult for local authorities to, at the same time as doing all that they need to do to protect children, to try and keep them at home, to remove them from home if that can't be done safely, and to work with them whilst they're in care, to also be recruiting and training and getting ready adopters. So organisations like ours, so as a voluntary adoption agency, we don't do the child protection bit, the looking after children in care. We do the recruiting and the supporting and the training and getting ready of adopters, so that local authorities have enough adopters to place with. So that's a really crucial difference between a local authority, regional adoption agency, and a voluntary adoption agency. what you would find at a voluntary adoption agency is specialists in adoption. This is what we do. We don't have those other services. So the social workers who work for us are all specialists in adoption, in supporting adopters. Many of us will have come from child protection backgrounds, safeguarding, working with children in local authorities, or working with adopters in local authorities, but will have come to PACT to specialise in adoption work. You sort of asked about, Jessica, the starting place and how you know what to choose. And Louise, you said earlier, I think the best advice we can give is research widely. You've got to find the right people for you and the right agency for you. Now at PACT, we'd love you to come to us, of course, but we work with all of the local authorities and regional adoption agencies who run great adoption services. It's not that we say they're no good at it, we're better, come to us. We say everybody is great at doing adoption work, but there's just too much of it for any one agency to do. So look, go and see. We run information evenings, very like this actually, every month, often more than one a month, either virtually. We used to do them face to face, of course. We're desperately hoping we can do them face to face again pretty soon, where we spend the evening together, tea, coffee, discussion, questions, anything you want to ask, no daft questions, nothing off limits. And regional adoption agencies will be running their own information evenings as well, and you may want to go and explore them. I think you'll know by asking the questions where the right place is for you.
Yeah.
Another best bit of advice I'd give is becoming a parent through adoption is only half the story. Of course, being a parent through adoption is the rest of it. So top tip when you're looking around at who you might want to adopt with is ask about the post-adoption support that's on offer, because we all assess adopters in the same way. Wherever you go, the process for becoming an adopter will be the same. There's a set format for how you're assessed, a set timescale for how you're assessed, even a set format for how that's written up and what your report looks like. The lifelong support is the thing that I think you really, really want to focus on. Ask wherever you go, once I'm an adopter, what then?
Yeah, and I know that's such a pertinent thing you said, because I know lots of people who adopted, and I think the post-adoption support is so important. Louise, can you just add, because I said this is a sort of slightly supplementary question to the question I've just asked Emma. I hope that's okay, but I just feel it would be really useful to know, like, if I was coming to PACT and I was going to go through the adoption process as a potential adopter, like, what are some of the things that happen, and or the big milestones, and how long does that take? I know that's a supplementary question. I apologise.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, basically, I mean, it's. I think it's a question that everybody would want to know, and that is, how long does the process take? There's many myths about adopting, who can adopt, who can't adopt, how intrusive a process it is, and everything else. So basically, you can you can apply and show your interest to an adoption agency in being assessed as an adoptive parent, and you only have to meet a few different things, really. You have to be over age 21. There's actually no upper age limit, but obviously you need to have energy to parent. We all know that. We all know, sort of, we've all got young kids around in our network. We know it takes energy. You have to be over 21. You have to be domiciled in the UK, and you have to have a spare room, and you also have to be free from any Schedule 1 offences against sort of offences against a child, or obviously sort of violence or something like that. So those are that would be sort of like, you could come into the process like that, and then basically it's just a matter of having an information sharing meeting. That's the very initial sort of stage, really. You show your interest, have an initial sort of meeting with a social worker. We tell you about the agency, we tell you about the process, even more detail. You share details about yourself, so we can all sort of be thinking along the lines of, is adoption right for you? And they're thinking, is it right for us or me or whatever? And then the next thing that will happen then is, if everyone decided actually that's great. It would be it would be a really good thing for you to do. Seem well suited, you've got a lot to offer, and that's something they want to do that. The adopters, then they go into the adoption process. It's a 2-stage process, and it takes in total 6 months. And as Emma said, that's not just a PACT process. It's a national sort of. There is a strategy for adoption, and there's regulations and legislation. It takes 6 months, and there's 2 stages. And the first stage is really what we call adopter-led, whereby it takes 2 months, and you come along to a preparation course, a training course, which talks to you about how to parent children that may have had a difficult start, obviously, in life. More of sort of a therapeutic approach, really, but how a lot of people are parenting their children today, whether that's birth children or whatever. And then during that first stage, the 2-month stage, it's called the stage 1. So we do a lot of reference checks, DBS checks. You have a health medical, personal references, and then the stage 2 of the process is the adoption assessment, which takes 4 months, and then you go along to panel. So.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really useful to have those stages outlined. Now, Louise, the next question is to you again. So I'm going to ask you to sort of answer that, but I'd love to come back to you, Emma, on the same question, because you did touch on this earlier when, your first piece of advice about being really broad-minded about sort of what children you might adopt. But can you tell us a little bit about the children that are waiting for adoption in the UK, their backgrounds, their ages?
Mm-hmm. So I think, I always say that there's too many children waiting for adoption, that there always is, and they wait a long time, and they need permanent homes. We all know that they thrive, and children have better outcomes in a permanent home. So the children waiting for adoption are of all ages, really. Some children are relinquished at birth. Some children, for whatever reason, some children are removed at birth. So it can really be from 0 up until sort of about 7th birthday, really, I think is probably about the upper limit. So yes, I mean, there's just a whole range of ages, children from all different heritages, children who have all the children really in the care system, it's a given, will have experienced loss and change in their little lives, because obviously for whatever reason, they've lost their birth family, and then when they come to adoption, they will have lost their caregivers, their foster carers. So there will be children that will have suffered more than we would have wanted them to suffer, with loss and change, and perhaps abuse. And this is where I think the adoption support and the Adoption Support Fund, which is a cross-party initiative, and that has continued and been fantastic, is there's a recognised need for therapeutic support to be provided for children, to help them heal in their permanent home, and help their parents parent them so that they can recover from adverse childhood experiences, and get on the way to recovery, really, and to sort of to thrive.
Yeah, oh, that's beautifully put. Can I come to you just, Emma, as a follow-up to that, because I think my understanding is that the nature of children that are looking for adoption has probably changed over the years and is different in different countries, and and forgive me if I'm saying this in the wrong way, or I'm coming at this from a position of ignorance, but my understanding is that many of the children that are looking for adoption in the UK they've had a very difficult start in life, otherwise they wouldn't be in that position, and that can, we all know that we are who our child, what's happened to us in our childhood, all of us, it often impacts on our future lives, so that it can be challenging. And can you maybe talk a little bit about how you, how you talk to people about? I mean, you're nodding, so I'm presuming that this is correct.
You're on the right lines, Jessica. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and what people need to be thinking? Because it's a different route to parenthood, isn't it? It's
Absolutely.
not. We always say in the fertility world there is no just. Like when people who've struggled to conceive, people say, why don't you just adopt? And there is no just in adoption. I think it's really important to say that.
Yes, there is no just. You have to go into, well, parenting, adoptive parenting, with eyes wide open. Because of course, let's be honest, we choose to be parents because we want to parent, we want to have children. But it's also, we talk about being really child focused. We're the grown-ups. We have choices. We don't always feel that we do, but we do have choices to make. Children don't. Children don't ask for the adverse experiences that they have in their early lives and in their families. Children, even from really tricky family lives, don't ask to be removed from their families usually. They haven't chosen to come into care. And to be blunt, they're not choosing. They're not saying we want adoptive parents necessarily. Many children would choose to be with the people they know and love, and it is really difficult for them. I think, Louise, you've sort of summarised really well, the ages and the ethnicities and children that are waiting. There's myths that stand. So the myth of the young mum, a teenage mum who couldn't look after a child, and they're having their children removed from them, or they're giving up children into care, is not the norm in adoption in the UK. So the images perhaps from the 50s, 60s, 70s, lots of family reuniting programs that are on, particularly at the moment. There, often people who gave up their children for adoption at a young age, or were removed, forcibly removed from them in horrible circumstances that we read about. That isn't what adoption is now. Very occasionally, there are children, we call it relinquished children who, for whatever reason, a birth mum isn't able to look after for their own reasons, and they will ask for those children to go into the care of the local authority and pick to be adopted, but that isn't the norm. So for most children, they will have been identified as being at risk. They will have lived in adverse circumstances, and not just slightly tricky circumstances, but the threshold for children to be removed from their children's care is significant harm, whether that's emotional harm, physical harm, sexual abuse, neglect. Local authorities will have needed to work really hard to try and keep children within their families, but ultimately, if it is just not possible for that to be done in a safe way, or in a way where all of their needs are being met to a good enough level in terms of somewhere to live and food and clothes and all of those basic necessities, if that's not possible, then local authorities will look to remove children from birth parents. What a horrific and incredibly difficult decision to make, because it is also a bit of a myth that children are from awful families who are deliberately hurting and abusing them. For most children, that isn't the case. Their birth parents generally desperately want to look after their children, desperately wish that their own circumstances and their lives were different so that they could do that. And we have a huge amount of care and empathy for what birth families go through when they have their children removed. And the idea that another family is now going to look after their children is an incredibly difficult situation for them to be in. But as I said, the threshold is harm, that children have been harmed and they will have been impacted by that. Now, children who are removed at a very young age will have been living in that situation for less time. Children who are older will have been living in that situation for a longer time. Some of those children will have developed resilience and coping strategies and mechanisms, but all of those children are going to need good parenting, good care, consistent routines, consistent boundaries. We think, back to top tips again, they keep coming up, Jessica, but we think that a really good thing to do to prepare for adoption is spend as much time with children as possible. Now, if you're looking at applying to an adoption agency, one of the things that you'll often be asked is, tell us about the children in your network, in your family, amongst your family and friends, any voluntary work that you've done, tell us about the time you've spent with children. And that's not meant to be there sort of as an impossible hurdle to get over. It's saying the children who are looking for adoption need people who've spent time with children, who can talk to children, who know how to develop a rapport with children, who like playing with children, who can be fun and distracting, all of those things that you learn as a parent. If you have a birth child, you learn those things as they grow up. As an adoptive parent, you need to be able to hit the ground running a little bit with some of these things, and being able to relate to children is the thing you really need to hit the ground running on, because you need to really have some of those basic relating to children skills under your belt, because children will come with additional emotional needs. Even if children haven't had really adverse experiences and haven't lived within their birth families for a very long time, they will have gone through the experience of losing that birth family, probably living in foster care, moving on from that foster carer. So the most children who are placed for adoption have lived in at least 2 homes before, but often more. Often, if they couldn't be in their birth family, they've maybe been with grandparents as well, or an uncle, aunt, or a friend, and then into foster care. So children have lost a lot by the time they come to adoption. And as I said, they didn't choose it for themselves. So it's the grown-up's job, it's the adopter's job to recognise the experiences that they've had, and that they're going to need more. They're going to need emotional support and nurture and care. And Louise talked about post-adoption support, and I mentioned it at the beginning. That's what's really important. You need to know that you're going to get the training that you need. You need to know that you're going to get the support that you need through the choosing your child process to make sure that match is right. It's got to be the right match, and that you're going to have therapeutic support afterwards, whatever that looks like. And, you know, in PACT, I mean, the reason that I work at PACT is because, as well as our adoption recruitment and training process, we have a massive adoption support service, a post-adoption support service. And for me, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think just going on from that, Jessica, I was just going to say, I think another myth is, although obviously children have had challenging starts and experienced loss and change, we have got to always remember these aren't a different breed of children. They are little children who want to be loved and who want to be understood. And it's about if a behaviour is, you know, comes out because of a trauma, then it's about understanding what's behind that behaviour and how to parent with empathy and understanding, and you know, and they are little children who deserve and need to be loved by parents. Absolutely,
absolutely. Now, I've been really naughty because I've gone over my 25 minutes and we have some questions. Laura sent I'm not going to ask my 5th question, but we've covered so much, and I do want to go to questions from the audience. So Laura, and also I'm just conscious about the football at 8 o'clock. So can you come in with the questions now?
Yeah, there's a few around age, and I know you mentioned it, but this person is saying, at the age of 47, is it true that we would not be able to adopt a baby? I heard that there has to be a certain difference in age between the oldest parent and the child. Is this correct?
Very good question.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. And it's a question that I've heard that's come up before, and that might be the case in some cases. But basically, you know, it goes back to the fact that there is no upper age limit. But you know, you have to have the energy to be able to. So if you were going to, it's more about really you are being assessed for your parenting capacity to parent a baby, to be able to get up in the middle of the night, you know, and the ability to take more time off work, because we like our adopters to take at least 12 months off once a child's placed. So obviously if you had a young baby, you'd have to have the sort of the plans and the finances to be able to obviously look after a baby. So, you know, no, it's happened. It's people are open to it. There's no set. I think they used to say there was something like a 50-year or a 45-year or something, an age gap. I've heard that before, but it's not as clear-cut and clinical as that. I mean, I know some 47-year-olds and a 51-year-old at the moment we've got who is looking for a child sort of 12 months to 4. So no, there's not any cut and dry answer to that.
Brilliant.
You know what I'd add as well, people are often surprised at the age of people who are adopting. So if you think about it logically, a huge number, probably the majority of people come to adoption because they haven't been able to have birth children for whatever reason. And logically, I guess, it means that most of our adopters are in their 40s.
Absolutely.
So people get to our preparation training. We run 4 days preparation training near the beginning of the process, and people look around the room and feel, oh, it's like a weight's been lifted from their shoulders. It's their age group of people. Not many people in their 20s have already been through that process of deciding they wanted children, fertility treatment, out the other side of deciding that they've had enough of that and that's not working for them, and on into adoption. And actually not that many people in their 30s actually. Usually there's that window where people are thinking that they may have a child naturally or through fertility treatment one way or another, and I reckon there's something that happens around people turning 40 perhaps, when they think those options aren't there for me in the same way anymore. So yeah, majority of our adopters are in their 40s.
Brilliant, thank you. Now Laura's saying loads of questions are coming in. That's because you're both
Okay.
brilliant. And so Laura, another question, and what we'll do is, if we just, like, one of you decide
quickly.
Quick answers. Let's do rapid fire here.
it's just good to get through as much as possible. Laura.
Thank you, girls. Okay, so this question is, how long do you have to wait after doing IVF before you can start the adoption process?
Okay, so every agency has usually got its own policy on this. There is core and BAF guidance, but we usually suggest a period of 6 months after your last fertility treatment to allow for time for you to physically heal, for you to emotionally heal, and feel fully resolved about not having a birth child going forward, and making sure that adoption is the right choice for you, and just being in the right headspace.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question, Laura.
This person is saying, would having Crohn's disease cause any issues with being approved? Would it exclude us?
Emma.
Oh, well, not necessarily. I mean, I can't comment on obviously anybody's individual circumstances, and it depends what they are. But we have many adopters who've got all sorts of health issues, or perhaps even mental health issues within their background. The issue is, are you fit enough and stable enough and well enough now, and likely to remain so, to be able to be a fit and active parent? So a big part of our stage 1 process and our information sharing process at the beginning is exploring medical issues of all sorts. So Crohn's disease as an example of that. And looking at whether that would inhibit you as a parent in any way. And even if it would there be workarounds to that? It's not, fit, active, able enough to run around after the child of the age that you're looking to adopt, and able to be stable and well enough into the future. They're the key things.
Certainly, a chronic illness like that, if there's one person or two people, your health is one part, but it's not the only part of being able to parent.
Brilliant.
So it's just a case of assessing it.
Brilliant. Laura, other questions?
Yes, there's this one. This is about, you mentioned the spare bedroom. This person is saying that they currently live in a flat in London, which has got a living room and a bedroom. So does that mean a spare room? And also, is it possible to start the process before they've moved to a bigger place? So they can say, they're in their 1-bedroom flat, and could they start the process of adoption before they've moved?
And they think they're in the living room and the child would be in the bedroom.
Yeah, so a spare room would mean a room that is solely for a child, that's dedicated to a child, and not just the bedroom, but the living environment that is big enough for the size of family that you're going to have. And this can feel incredibly cruel, and it can feel quite discriminatory, I think, to people who are in a situation where they can't get onto that next rung of the ladder, into that bigger accommodation, until they know that they're going to adopt, whether that's privately, renting. It wouldn't be worth them moving if they don't know it's going to happen, or if you're in council accommodation, you can't get that bigger accommodation until you've got a child. Very chicken and egg, and we absolutely understand that. Part of the assessment, though, is the living environment that you're in. So the home that you're providing, you as a parent, but the home that you're providing, the locality, your support network, where they live in relation to you, what facilities and amenities are around, what schools and nurseries around. All of those things are part of the assessment. So it can be quite tricky to complete an assessment unless you're living in accommodation already, which is suitable. That's always something that we'd be happy to talk to people about, because it may be that moving is a very realistic prospect and it's going to happen and it's imminent. But it could be the case that it would be very difficult for that to happen, and we would find it very difficult to get somebody approved unless they're already living in a circumstance that can show the life. And of course, once you're approved, you're immediately looking for children, and local authorities will be looking to place children. And so it's difficult for then to be a gap for you to move at that point. But do talk to us about that, because everybody's reasons and issues around that can be different.
Brilliant. I think one of the things that's really coming across that feels really positive is that there is flexibility, you know, like, but I think it's so interesting what you're saying about there are all these myths around adoption. People think there's an upper age range, or I haven't got quite the right circumstances. It's so heartening to hear that you look at everyone on an individual basis. Any more questions, Laura?
Yep, a lot more questions actually. There's a question here. Sorry, that's my dog wanted to ask a question. Did the birth parents have any contact even after the adoption?
So I'll answer that. It's very rare in the UK that we have an open adoption where there would be contact. What is usual is a one-off meeting with birth parents during the matching process, where you would be supported and accompanied by your social worker. And then it's really important for the children to keep their identity and know where they come from and everything else. So there would nearly always be letterbox contact ordered by the courts, and that is all managed by the local authority to keep everything safe and the placement address secure.
Brilliant, thank you, Louise. Any more? Well, yes, we do have more questions. Next question, Laura.
This person says they've got a reservation around the ability to form a strong bond and attachment with the child, and as they care and give her the older they become. Do you see any attachment barriers? Do they play a part in the children settling in with the adoptive parents, and how do people overcome these in general?
Really good question.
So, sorry, can I just clarify that? Is that question about the child's ability to attach and whether a child is going to be able to attach and as they get older, whether they'll be able to do that?
I think it's on both sides. This person is saying they have reservations about their ability to form strong bonds and attachments with the child.
Okay. Yeah,
I would say, look, if you look at that, if you think about then have you actually fully resolved not being able to have a child through birth? I think you would have to look at that. But I think as well, look at children in your network that aren't yours, who you love. That could be a child, a neighbour's child. It could be, you know, children you've got very strong bonds with. If you're a teacher, you could have very strong bonds with children at school, nephews, nieces. You know, it is possible. It is possible, and we see it every day. You know, people can love children, adore them, and, you know, protect them. And if they haven't given birth to them, is in a nutshell for that side of the question. Emma?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, because this is a hosted, you know, in the context of fertility, isn't it? If you've been thinking about having a birth child and you're needing to switch your focus to thinking about having a child that's been born from somebody else, that's perhaps lived with somebody else, grown up for a while with somebody else, I can completely understand that as a reservation. And I think that is a brilliant question and a really brave and open and honest question to ask. Actually, I really appreciate that somebody has felt able to ask that. And that's what we explore with you, really. You know, when we talk about information sharing at the beginning, you're not expected to walk in and say, hey, I'm ready to adopt. We share information. We talk to you more about what adoption is, and you talk to us about what your story's been and why you've got to this point. And through training and preparation, we think about these things together. And for some people, the answer to that will be, no, I'm not sure enough myself that I will build that relationship, or I'm too concerned that a child might not build that relationship with me to feel that this is the route for me. But that would be through honest exploration.
know lots of people who've been through the process and decided it isn't for them, and that's really valid, because if it's not for you, it's not for the child either, because this little person needs to know that it's right. Laura, another question.
Yeah, forgive me, ladies, if we've covered this, but I'll ask it just in case we haven't. Are the types of children that voluntary organisations have different to those that local authority have access to?
So the voluntary adoption agencies don't have any children. We're not corporate parents for anybody. So the local authorities have children in the care system where they share parental responsibility with the birth parents. We don't. But what we do, as Emma said in the first place, is we recruit adopters so that there are sufficient adopters waiting for all of the children in the UK, basically, and that's because local authorities cannot always meet their sufficiency needs, and they have to look elsewhere, and also sometimes for security reasons as well. They don't want to place it in the same area where birth parents are. But so there's no comparison of children, because we don't actually have children. We match our adopters with children from local authorities. We're the same children.
I feel like it's such a good question, because it sort of throws up how confusing it is for people that the children are with the local authorities, and sometimes the local authorities adopt them out, or sometimes they adopt them out through agencies such as yourselves. And I just don't think that's always clear to people. So it's such a good question. Another question, Laura.
Will the lack of savings have an impact on me being able to adopt?
Ooh.
That's really good questions tonight. Savings in and of themselves, money shouldn't be a preclusion to adoption. There's, Louise said at the beginning, not many things should preclude people from adopting. You need to be financially stable. You need to be, the same as if you were going to have a birth child, no different actually. You need to be able to have the money you need to look after yourself and a child. Or however many children you're looking at adopting, and to be able to take a period of adoption leave, very similar to a period of maternity or paternity leave. So Louise mentioned earlier, local authorities are usually looking for somebody who would be able to take leave for a year. Occasionally less than that, but around a year would be normal, because that is a kind of number that people often take for maternity or paternity leave. So you don't have to be rich, you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to have lots of money in the bank, but you do need to be financially stable, living in a situation where you can provide for yourself and a child, and can take a good period of time in that first year while a child is settling. You are entitled to child benefit, the same as a birth parent would be. Most children don't have an adoption allowance. Sorry, say that again.
Sorry, statutory adoption pay as well.
Yeah, adoption pay.
Since 2014, it's identical to statutory maternity leave. It's completely equal. And exactly, just adding to what Emma said there as well, I think it's more important, rather than to say about savings, to say about, if you're in debt, then obviously that could be an issue, because obviously you need to be stable. So, but we don't expect people to all have sashes and sashes of money, because I think as well, when people come through adoption through IVF, sadly they've actually depleted a lot of their savings already on IVF treatment, and it would be really unfair then for those people, because you haven't got all the savings you've depleted, to be turned away for adoption.
Yeah.
I realised it's 5 to 8. What do you want to do? One more question, or do we need to wrap up?
Happy with one
I'm
more
okay
question.
to keep going. They're fine to keep going. I know people might disappear because they've got to watch the footy, but I'm fine.
We've got 2 more, and I think they're quite quick, so it'd be lovely if we can. Okay, so the question here is, in regards to references, is it true that you need to receive references from ex-partners? I.e., do I need to get a reference from my ex?
Ex-partners, wow.
This is always and naturally, ex-partners are ex-partners for a reason. Not all relationships end amicably. If you've lived with somebody or you've parented with children, it's always pertinent that we get a reference from them. We would never put anybody at risk though, or a local authority wouldn't as well, because obviously if there had been domestic violence in the relationship or something like that, obviously, you know, you wouldn't want that ex to be contacted. But I think it's just about, if you've parented with another partner, that can really add to your skills, evidence of your skills that you've parented together. And yeah, but again, that mustn't be a barrier. We like to look beyond barriers, but it's hugely important. These are the most vulnerable children in society, and we need to safeguard them. And part of that safeguarding is looking into history. And, you know, there have been serious case reviews where there's been a death of a child which could have been prevented if there had been a realization or a reference had been pursued from an ex-partner. But what we would do is we wouldn't just say, oh, okay, that's fine, we won't do it. We would corroborate the ending of the relationship and your version of it with another referee instead. So it wouldn't be swept under the carpet, because it's very important for safeguarding. But we would take
you do speak to previous partners, do you? That is a core part of the process.
Yeah. If you've lived with somebody or parented with somebody.
Right. Great. Final question.
Okay. Are there any particular health issues that would prevent us from adoption?
I mean, I can only answer that by being sort of back to being currently fit, healthy and stable, and having a good prognosis that you'll continue being that. And it's not a social work assessment of this. You're asked to have a medical check with your GP, and for your GP to make, you know, to say whether you are fit, healthy and stable. And we as an agency have our own medical advisor who'll look at the information that we have. So, you know, if you have a debilitating condition that's affecting you day to day, which is affecting your functioning and your ability to maybe care for yourself, but would affect your day to day ability to care for a child, to meet their needs and to be active and fit with them, then that may preclude you. Not necessarily if you're part of a couple, then, you know, that's taken into account. There may be one, if you're, you know, one partner who has a condition which, you know, does impact on day-to-day life, but another that doesn't. So that may be possible. But, you know, we have people who've you know, had cancer and recovered, who've had quite debilitating illnesses in the past and recovered, who've had absolutely, yeah, ongoing conditions that they live with and manage, and the prognosis is good, that they'll continue to live with that and manage. So again, I mean, I kind of keep on saying it, but we're interested in people's individual stories and histories and talking to people, because I think, you know, Louise said there are too many children waiting for adoption. We don't want to preclude people. We want people to be able to adopt. And so there shouldn't be many things that preclude you.
And just to say, you know, we've had many adopters with various different things. You know, we've had people with disabilities who we've approved for adoption, people with chronic conditions like diabetes, HIV, but it's been assessed that it doesn't impact on their energy levels and their ability to parent. The other thing about that is, well, I'll just quickly add, is obviously, as we said at the very beginning, these children have suffered loss and change, and obviously we are hoping that a parent that adopts them is going to be able to parent them sort of to adulthood and beyond, and not, you know, pass away. I mean, obviously sad things happen, tragic things happen, but if it can be, you know, it's about looking at prognosis, really.
Please, Emma, it's been such a brilliant session. Thank you so much. I didn't even get through all my questions, but I'm conscious about the time. We never usually go over at 8 o'clock, football or no football, so we must carry on. It's just been brilliant. Thank you so much. I think you can tell from the questions, you know, how much it's meant to people. A few final things before we go. Don't forget to download the Peanut app. It's totally free. Join the Fertility Show group. Sign up to all our social channels, and don't forget to buy your tickets for the summit. I'm sure Louise and Emma will be back there.
Hopefully.
And at the live show next year. So plenty more time to answer questions. And next week, my lovely co-host Sophie will be back in the chair interviewing our expert guest about surrogacy in the UK. So if that's something you're thinking about, please do join us. That's all there is to say. Good luck, England. Good night.
Thank you. Bye.